Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first Financial Empowerment Charla of the year, and it's a big one. The number one topic I get asked about by youth, by young professionals, and by parents is, how do I deal with student debt? It's even a concern in pop culture. The rapper Logic said in a bar, I can't afford a home because I'm 25 and owe 100 grand in student loans. If that doesn't hit home in terms of what we're dealing with as a community, nothing will. And I'm Antonio Tijerino with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. We are thrilled to provide critical information, resources, and guidance on this important topic, thanks to our impactful partnership with Nationwide. We started the Financial Empowerment Initiative last year to educate and facilitate our community's journey to financial wellness. We actually launched during last year's pandemic and adapted the program to address the financial crisis many in our community were facing in real time. A year later, we're still addressing those issues we faced, but adapted once again to not only where we were, but where we are and where we need to go in our everyday finances. And it's no accident that we're launching on the eve of Financial Literacy Month. And none of this would be possible without the tireless work of mi gran amiga, Lori Burgos, and her team at Nationwide, and what they've been doing behind the scenes, along with Juana, Jessica, Andres on my team, and the rest of my team. So thank you, Lori and Nationwide, for your commitment to our community's financial well-being. Lori.
Hi there, Tony. It's so great to be here with you and your team. We are just so thrilled to once again be partnering with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation to bring these charlas to life. At Nationwide, our mission is to protect people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care. And so to that end, our goal with these charlas is to help the Hispanic community build stronger futures and legacies through financial wellness.
Yes, Lori, and one of the keys that we have to address is also generational wealth. There's so many opportunities to elevate our community by not only talking about money and wealth creation, but by actually providing the guidance to take those tangible steps.
Absolutely. That is why we're hosting these charlas, and that's why they're so important. We need to encourage our community to talk about money, to learn more about how to hold on to our money. And so that as they learn, they also share what they're learning con los primos, con las tías, with all of their family, because that is the only way that we're going to break the cycle and enable our community, to your point, to close the wealth gap that exists today.
And as I mentioned, today's charla is about a very relevant topic of conversation, including by our policymakers: student loans, which impact 45 million Americans in the amount of $1.7 trillion.
And that is such a striking number, Tony. And the numbers the impact is even greater for the communities of color. We know that 90% of Black students, 72% of Hispanic students are taking loans compared to only 66 of their white counterparts. So again, that impact to our communities of color is even greater.
That's such a dramatic contrast you just laid out. Unfortunately, it actually makes sense in terms of the median income for Blacks and Latinx are well below whites, which means we have to count on these loans even more because we don't have a lot of resources to tap from our families. According to the Department of Education, Black and Latinx students are dropping out with a debt at higher rates than white students, which also creates a cycle of financial inequality along with the educational inequality that has led some to say that America's student debt crisis is a civil rights crisis. And student debt can actually prevent Latinx and Black folks from building generational wealth. And I found a statistic that shows the mere threat of student debt is getting in the way of our dreams. Nearly 90% of Latinx students see college as being important for success in life, but only 48% see themselves going to college because they don't want to create the financial burden on their families. So yeah, Lori, this is a very important topic for our community. And as somebody with 3 children and 1 in high school, I'm going to be listening intently.
Absolutely. And, you know, throughout the charlas, we want to encourage and challenge our Latinos and Latinas to think differently, not only about education, but things like retirement, which the next charla will talk into, and just overall management of our dollars, because we want to help our Hispanic community build that generational wealth. So the last thing that I wanted to say, Tony, is that encourage all of our viewers and participants today to please sign up for the next charla. which is happening on Wednesday, April the 14th at 4 o'clock again. And we will be talking about retirement, because the best time to start building your retirement is when you're in your 20s. And so anytime is good to build your retirement. But we want to, again, encourage our younger folks to start early so that it will cost them less money and at the same time get greater peace of mind.
As a guy in his late 50s, I can tell you, I wish I had started earlier. But thank you again for everything you do, Lori. And now let's get started with Paul Roldan. Paul is a certified financial planner and CEO and co-founder of All Gen Financial, headquartered in Orlando, Florida, where he serves clients around the world in their quest for financial freedom. Paul earned a bachelor's degree from Princeton University and a graduate degree from Harvard University. I don't think either one made it to the March Madness tournament, by the way, just saying, Paul. But Paul also serves as a chairman of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Metro Orlando, helping small businesses prepare for the long-term viability. Let's go, Paul.
Tony, thank you so much. Tony, Lori, Juana, the folks at Nationwide and Heritage Foundation. I'm so thankful to be able to return this year and really share some good information. You know, I'm honored that I would be part of this effort because as you heard the statistics, they're alarming. And more alarming for our people, for Latinos and Hispanics in our country. And it's so critical that we get equipped with good information, with some good resources and tools to be able to avoid the pitfalls and traps that many of us and our predecessors have not been able to avoid, which, you know, good efforts, good intentions, but unfortunately we fall into some of these traps that keep holding us back. So I want to kick this off by asking a question, and I'd like the participation of our viewers and listeners today. If you have a computer screen, you should be able to actively participate, and none of your answers will be shared with anyone else. So I want to encourage you to please participate and answer which one of these makes sense for you. I currently have student loans. I'm thinking about getting student loans, or I was able, or I'm planning on getting my education without going into debt. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds to assess your situation and to share with us. Again, none of your information, your personal information will be shared with anyone else. So please go for it. All right, I think that's enough time for people to see where we're at. Let's see. Do we have an answer here? Okay, so about half of our listeners currently have student loans. 23% are thinking about getting student loans, and 25%, okay, were able to get an education without going into debt. So very good for those that you're able to do it without it. But as you can see, the majority of our listeners either have it or are thinking about going into it. So this is very good for you guys. And for those of you who are able to do it without, you know, we welcome comments, we welcome, you know, some thoughts, or even the ability for you to share this with others who I'm sure may be considering getting into debt as well. Okay, so I want to actually ask for those of you that do have student loans or are thinking about getting it, more participation points, please. If you have student loan debt, how much debt do you have? So pick one, 1 to 10,000, 11 to 30, 31 to 50, or 50 more, or again, I don't have student loan debt. I'll give you a second to figure that one out. Okay, so let's see what everyone answered. We're moving right along here. I want to make sure we get to the good stuff and to our co-presenters. So of everyone who answered, okay, 46, but we have 10% under 10,000, 16, under 30, 20%, over 50. Okay, very good. So I think we have enough material in this conversation to apply to all the listeners today. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for participating. With that being said, part of what we want to do is make this real. There's two elements to financial progress. There's the behavioral side, okay, the mechanics of what we need to do, but the behavioral and the psychological side, understanding the reasons of why we make certain decisions. And usually the behavior drives a lot of decisions, whether they make sense or not, okay? So we like to bring this down to earth first and then give you some tools to take home with you and say, okay, how do I apply this to my own life? Whichever one of these spectrum you lie with regard to student loans. So with that said, I want to introduce my good friend and colleague, Vivi Schenk. Vivi Schenk is a financial freedom strategist and a blogger. She's been sharing for years on strategies and tools and empowering people to really take control of their finances. So we invited her here today, and I'm honored to be able to share the microphone with her. Vivi, please share with us some thoughts about student loans and how you would approach it. Welcome, Vivi.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And thank you also Hispanic Heritage and Nationwide for creating this space to empower our community. So I just want to address you who are watching today and connecting right now. I wanted to ask you a question. If you knew that there was another way to go through college besides taking on student loans, would you have followed it, or would you follow it? I remember when I was in high school, about to graduate, right? Maybe you can put yourself in this position too. And all of my friends, they were picking up their schools, they were picking up majors, and they seemed so excited and so confident about the decisions that they were making and what they were picking. But not me. I was completely lost and I had no clue what I was going to do. And I don't know if you can relate to this. And I remember one day clearly running to my computer right after school and trying to search up on Google, test vocacional, right? The career quiz, just so that some algorithm could let me know what am I supposed to do for the rest of my life. And so I chose a field. I decided to pursue engineering. I went to school and all of that. But honestly, looking back, I know the reason why I chose what I chose, the moment that I chose it. It wasn't because I was excited about it or I felt sure or confident or anything like that. It was actually the complete opposite. And I want you to ask yourself, what was it for you? Or what is it for you? Because maybe you were in the same boat as I was and you were asking yourself some of the following questions. Maybe you're asking yourself, what if I'm left behind, right? What if you're left behind while everyone else starts moving forward? What if you disappoint your parents? They worked so hard to give you a better future. They've sacrificed so much. Maybe they even left their hometowns, their home countries to give you the American dream so that you can have something better, and you can't take that for granted, right? You need to honor those sacrifices. Or maybe you were thinking, if you don't do it now, what if you never do? And you just are left wondering, what if forever, right? What was it for you? Was it external pressure, or maybe it was right peer pressure or self-imposed pressure? Because here's the thing, I believe that education is one of the key players that can help us reduce the wealth gap that we're experiencing as a community. But unfortunately, there's this one thing that is making its way into this equation that is making things harder. And I think this one thing is pressure. See, and we can't continue to let pressure blind us and rush us into making a decision right now, even though we can't necessarily afford it. And so we end up taking student loans. Things need to start changing, right? So before you make decisions about your education, and before you make any kind of financial decision, honestly, you need to pause and think about the outcomes and consequences. Okay, if I'm taking a loan right now, that means I'm gonna have to pay it at some point, right? And take the time to research and understand and evaluate, okay, how does interest work? What am I truly signing up for? And seek for options and possibilities. And you might find out that there's actually another way that you can follow and that it's actually achievable. We really need to start changing things, because reality today is that student loan, like we've heard already, affects 45 million Americans and is of about $1.7 trillion. And the average student loan debt is of over $36,000. And our reality, like they've already mentioned, is that 90% of Black students and 72% of Hispanic students take out loans compared to 66% of white students. So as we've seen right now, as you've confirmed actually with the polls, chances are that, you know, if you're Hispanic, you either have student loan debts or you're considering having student loan debts, right? Those are the numbers. I didn't have student loan debts, but I've been buried in debt. So if you have student loan debt right now or any kind of debt, I know how you feel. I know how it feels because I've been there. I know how at the beginning it's fine, right? It's okay. Everyone does this. Everyone lives this way. This is how you do life, right? If everyone has done it, then I can do it too. If they have managed, then I can manage too. And maybe, yes, at the beginning, you can do it and you are making your payments and it's fine, right? And it's manageable and it's no big deal. but you don't realize that debt is sucking up your income. Because here are some other facts. The average student loan collects $26,000 in interest alone. And this equals to 67% of the total cost of repayment. So when you finally pay off your debt, most of it was actually interest. Isn't that crazy? And maybe you're starting to feel the weight of it. Maybe you're starting to make payments like I was, making payments every single month, but somehow the balance just looks the same. It doesn't seem like it's changing. And it kind of feels like you're going to be paying this debt forever. And the reason why it feels that way is because the average payoff period for student loans is from 12 to 20 years. That's why it feels like forever. Right? And maybe you are starting to feel the weight of it. Maybe you're even starting to feel stuck. Right? Maybe you're stuck in a position or in a job that you don't even love, but you need to stick to it because you need to continue making those payments. Or maybe you're even in a position that I got myself into, which is that I wasn't able to make those payments. I actually didn't think things through, and I quit my job while I had debt. And so I found myself in collections, right? And being woken up by collections at the break of dawn because I was constantly late and I was constantly unable to make my payments. And right now, I giggle a little bit and I laugh because of my own silliness, but honestly, there's nothing laughable about that. It was a very tough situation. And I almost cried every single day because it was so hard. I was so lost. I had no clue what I was supposed to do. I didn't know what to ask, right? I didn't know what to Google this time. And I didn't know who to ask. And if I'm completely transparent with you, I didn't want to ask because there's this thing about money. When you're not doing as you hoped for, as you wished for with money, as well as you hoped for, there's just this shame attached to it. I was embarrassed. I didn't want people to know that I was failing. And I think, honestly, looking back, I didn't want to see it myself. I didn't want to admit to myself that I was failing and that maybe the road that I chose wasn't necessarily the best. Which is why I want to ask you again, if you knew there was another way to go through college, besides taking on loans, would you have followed it? Or if you knew there was another way, period, would you follow it? Because that's what I realized. I realized that there's actually another way. And I decided to follow it because I refused to continue living that way. That was not the reality that I was okay with. I was going to change things. And if that meant, pulling up my sleeves and grabbing the bull from the horns and turning things around, I was determined to do so. If I had to take on jobs, right, that weren't worthy of a professional like myself, I was going to do that. And honestly, you know what? It was worth it. It was worth it because I was able to turn things around. I was able to take myself out of that situation. And not only that, I was also able to help my loved ones. I was able to help my husband get out of his student loans. Then we paid off his car loans. Then we saved money. We paid my car cash. Then we started saving money and started investing and growing our wealth. And things are completely different right now. Our finances today are completely different right now. They're not past focused, they are future focused. It's completely different. And so it was totally worth it. And so I want to encourage you right now to take pen and paper if you haven't done so yet, and be ready to take notes because you're going to be shown today what you can do. You're going to be shown a different way if you already have student loans and if you're considering student loans. And so before I leave, I just want to speak into you something that was spoken to me once, which is the following. Within you, you have everything that is needed to achieve greatness. If I was able to turn things around, you can turn things around too. You can choose a different way and you can change and write a different story.
That's awesome. Vivi, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think most of you can see, one, the passion behind what she has about the subject matter, but two, the life experience, okay, the pressure. I understand also came from a family where my mother was an immigrant from Cuba. My father was a high school dropout. So, they always said, study hard, Dale, you can do this, which is great. but energy directed in the wrong direction can lead to further damage. So this is why we're saying this, because we understand the pressures. And I'm very honored again to have Vivi share with us her story, because she's been through some of this herself. I've been through some of this, and now we're gonna, once we understand the why and the importance of thinking and taking a step back to understand the decisions that we make. And I say this because I had my own educational trajectory, okay? And now I have a son. I've got a freshman in college, okay? So I understand what he's going through and how we bring this all together for his betterment in the future financially. So thank you, Vivi, for sharing that. And we're gonna have Vivi come back here in a second. I wanna encourage you, I know some of you are already doing this, okay? And you know the drill already, but please feel free to start asking questions in the chat. We're gonna be monitoring it. And if it's appropriate to do so during the chat, we'll do that. You know, we'll pause and ask the question, or we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to type up any questions that you may have for us, and we promise we'll try to get to everyone as soon as we can. But while you do that, I'm going to proceed and introduce my next co-speaker. And this is my friend and colleague, Karen Vergara. Karen is a fiduciary financial advisor. She is my co-worker as well, my colleague at Algen Financials Advisor here, my friend, and all that kind of good stuff. So Karen, welcome to the conversation. And I know you're passionate about this, so welcome to the chat.
Thank you so much, Paul. I am so excited to be here today because student loans is one of my favorite subjects to discuss. So before we start diving deep into this subject, I want to get an understanding now how you feel about your student loans. So we're going to go into a poll question now. Poll number 3. Regarding student loans, I feel stressed. I'll never pay them off. Indifferent. I don't care about paying them off. Confident. I am sure I will get rid of them. Unsure. I want to pay them off, but don't know where to begin. Or not applicable because you don't have student loan debt, but perhaps you're considering it. So let's give you 3 more seconds and let's check those poll answers. Andres, please. Okay, so we have some mixed feelings around student loans. And let me tell you that you're not alone in that you've come to the right place. We're going to be addressing those of you first who are considering getting into student loan debt to finance your education. So if we go to the next slide, please. Andres, next slide. Perfect, thank you. You have options, okay? You have options when it comes to going to school and not graduating with debt. You can first start working now if you're in high school and start saving for college. You can get a summer job or an after school job and start saving for your education. Your second option is to work during college. So that's what I did. I know, Paul, that's what you did. I used to work 30, 40 hours a week. I know that's quite a bit. You don't have to work as much. And I still maintained a full course load and did well with that. There are statistics out there that say that individual students who work while going to school actually perform better and they get better grades. And I think it has to do something with the fact that we have to learn how to manage our time. So it's going to serve you well if you start doing that.
That's right, Karen. It's interesting that you say that because, again, you and I worked during college, okay, and my grades were fine. It made me more responsible. I had a better time management, which obviously are transferable skills, you know, when we graduate school and go to workforce. And now it's hard because, you know, thankfully I've been, you know, a professional, successful, and my son is a freshman in college right now. Okay, so we had prepared with some scholarship stuff and some college funds, etc. But there was a short gap for spending money and for, I forgot what it's called right now, but some tuition fee that he has to, you know, athletic fee or whatever it is. I said, that's great, son, go find a job. And he said, what do you mean, Dad? You know, I said, and you know, as Latinos, oh, bendito, that's gonna distract them, or I wanna give, yes, I wanna give my son more than I had growing up. I get it. But part of me giving him is the responsibility, understanding that owning your own financial sustenance is so critical. So he's working right now and he's actually enjoying his job. He is killing it at school, better than he did in high school. So, you know, of course, proud daddy moment here. Okay, but I think that's a great gift that we can give to our children that goes beyond that cultural mindset, that influence of our behaviors. Like, oh, I didn't have this, so let me give it all to my son. Well, giving them your son is also, or your daughter, is the ability to empower them to fend for themselves as well. Sorry, Karen, but thank you.
No, that's great. That's great. So I agree with you. Another option that you can actually do is you can join a company that offers education assistance. So you can find an employer who is willing to help you get an education. And this happens a lot for postgraduate students or even technical or vocational degrees. If you know the kind of job you want to do, and if it requires some type of education, then look for employers who are willing to offer that education assistance. And really think about it. It's like having a raise, because you not only get paid for the work that you do, but your education is also getting paid through your employer. And here's my all-time favorite option: scholarships. When I was in college, my family gave me a nickname, and it was scholarships, because I applied to so many of them. It was kind of like my side hustle. I love scholarships, and here's why. Let's say you apply to get $1,000 scholarship. Between the essay, the application, the letter of recommendation that you need to obtain to apply, you spend 10 hours. If you get the scholarship of $1,000, divide that by the amount of hours that you spent on applying, guess what? You just made $100 an hour. Imagine if you applied for a $5,000 scholarship or a $2,000 scholarship and spend 10 hours. With scholarships, there's this rare opportunity for you as a student to make hundreds of dollars per hour, and people don't take enough advantage of it, and they don't take the time to apply and look for them. So at the end of the day, you can really just combine all these different options that I have just shared with you and not have to take student loans. I know, again, I did a few of these and I graduated debt-free. If we go to the next slide, please, we have some scholarship resources here that we have available. But I want to briefly touch on these last two options when it comes to these resources. If you know what you want to do when you get out of college, then you could look into trade or membership organizations within the industry that you are pursuing. So, for instance, if you want to be a CPA in the state of Florida, then you could look into Florida Institute of CPA's Scholarship Foundation. Another great option is to look for and apply for local scholarships. They usually have less applicants and you have a higher chance at winning. You can usually look for these kinds of opportunities in social media, in local, digital, and printed newspapers. And one of the best places that you can find these opportunities if you go to your school's financial aid website. Let's go to the next slide, please.
And while we do that, I wanted to share,
Yes.
Karen, about the resources. Applying for scholarships, as you said, is almost a part-time job, but we can't let our biases prohibit or inhibit us from applying. Okay, and I say that, for example, I sat down with a financial aid officer one time, and he says, "Paul, you don't know how much money goes untapped because people don't even apply for the scholarships, and sometimes it's because we have these biases." He shared an example with me. A local college here, the women's basketball team was offering a scholarship. Okay, so they had, I think it was a $5,000 scholarship. So they put it out there. No one applied except one person. Happened to be a guy, a male student, okay, was awarded the scholarship because it didn't say you had to be a woman. It didn't say you had to be a basketball player. He was neither. And he got the scholarship from the women's basketball team. So I thought it was a humorous story, but it drove the point home that we cannot let our biases, you just never know. We got to cast the net and be willing to look for what might come our way.
Agreed 100%. Now, Paul, we just shared some different options that you have to finance your college education, but a big factor to consider is how much to pay for that education. So what are some of the things that you should be considering in terms of tuition costs and the school that you choose to attend?
This is interesting, and this is an interesting subject here because I think you might say I'm biased. Tony introduced my educational background, which I'm very blessed, and thank God and my parents for motivating me to do that. But I am not biased. And just to make sure that my bias doesn't come out, yes, I went to a private school, two private schools. Karen did not. Okay, so you've got both perspectives here. Okay, now Vivi did share the pressure that we feel from our parents, okay? So it's interesting because, you know, when I was planning on going to school, you know, if I say, oh, mommy, daddy, papi, I'm thinking of applying to this school, they may say, ¿Y qué es eso? Okay, but you said, voy para Harvard. Okay, everybody knew what a Harvard was, you know, or, you know, un printón. Okay, so they knew what those were. Okay, so yes, there is this inherent old legacy prestige, okay, with going to the school, but there's also a price tag associated with that typically. Okay, and I say that because we're not going to get into the whole financial aid conversation here today, even though there are some questions about that. But some of these schools do have phenomenal financial aid for students who are under certain income levels. And they didn't know that. I was a recruiter for Princeton, and great students would not apply because they think they couldn't afford it. And yet I would convince them and they would get free rides, okay, or close to it. I got almost a free ride, okay, because of my income level from my parents. So that's a separate conversation, but there is that pressure. So let's think about this for a second from a price tag level, okay? The average private college is about $35,000, okay, to attend, okay? The average public school, if you come from out of state, I live in Florida. If my son were to go to school in North Carolina, which he didn't, okay, he would have to pay an average of $21,000 to attend that school. Okay, this is annual costs, okay? And the average public in-state cost is about $9,600, $9,700. That's a huge difference, okay? So what are you paying for? Probably the prestige, okay? But there's some pros and cons to both. So again, I promise we would be objective. And here's some pros and cons to the private school. A pro is typically they're smaller institutions, so you have a better student-teacher ratio, perceived prestige, easier networking with maybe like-minded people, because again, you have access to the smaller network of people, and maybe the higher education quality could be a little bit better because again, the ratio is better, so more interaction between the students and the like-minded students. Cons, it's more expensive, as you just saw the slide, typically lesser diversity, okay, less social activities because it is a smaller group, and less access to research facilities because again, smaller student body. So those are some of the pros and cons of the private school. Let's take a look at the public school pros and cons. Public school, as you saw, more affordable because it's typically student bodies are bigger, higher diversity, campus life, more social activities, more community connection. Usually, in Florida and Orlando, our community college and our local university are very involved in the community on different levels. Academic flexibility and additional options, and research facilities are usually bigger with more resources. The cons, larger teacher-student ratio. So you may be in a class with a couple hundred people versus in a class of 20, okay? And maybe the lesser prestige. But I want to dispel something right now, okay? And this is where I'm going to show you that there's no bias in my presentation today. And, Juana from the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, she may disagree with me, but I told my son that he does not have to go to an Ivy League school. This is coming from a double Ivy League graduate, okay? Because there are a lot of successful people who don't attend Ivy League institutions. So as Vivi was saying, we have to weigh the pros and cons, okay? And if the pro is just being successful, well, you hear these prestigious rates, only 8%, 7% of people get into Ivy League schools. There's a lot more successful people than 7% of the population. So they're going somewhere else, okay? So Karen, here's some examples of people that didn't go to private schools, and I think they did okay.
Yeah, and I want to start by just sharing also that I had to make that same decision. So the pressure was, it was a little bit ago that I went, that I had to make that decision, but I still had to make a few decisions when I was in high school. So the first decision that I made was that I would be commuting to and from school. My parents are immigrants. I am an immigrant myself. They could not help me pay for school. They said, we're not going to pay for your school, figure it out. But what they did say, you can stay and live here. We're not going to kick you out. So I thought, okay, if you're giving me already room and board, that's good. There's no need for me to go somewhere else, even within the state, because I want to just stay local so I can save on room and board. So that was the first decision that I made. The second decision that I made was between going to a private and a public school. And I applied to 2 schools, which were the only ones that offered an accounting program here within commuting distance. I got accepted to both. But what's interesting was that when I received the financial aid package, the private school offered a $20,000 scholarship per year. And the public school offered me a $1,000 scholarship per year. So you would think that based on that, I would have chosen to go to the private school. And I had friends that were going there. I had, my real desire was to go to that private school. But when I crunched the numbers as the good CPA that I was on my way to becoming, I still needed to meet the gap between the tuition and the cost, which was tens of thousands of dollars higher. So I ended up going with the public school because my tuition was covered through other scholarships. And since I was working and I was also commuting, I ended up being able to graduate debt free. What's more interesting is that when I left college and I went to work at my dream company right out of college, I ended up working with someone who went to that private school to get that accounting degree. We had the same position, we had the same salary, and we got promoted equally. My choice of school made no difference in that scenario. And so over here, you can say also that there are a lot of very successful individuals, including a couple billionaires, who attended public college. Even if you decide to go to community college, which if we go to the next slide, we have some names there of successful individuals who went to community college. I have plenty of friends that did that. They saved so much because they started their 2 years. They got their associates at community college, then went off to go to either a public or private school. But we have here some great individuals here. If you don't know who Eileen Collins is, she is the first female commander of a space shuttle. As a matter of fact, I have a very good friend who went to community college. She did so well in community college that she then won a scholarship that paid for her undergrad graduate degree at my school. I went to the University of Central Florida, go Knights. And then she got her postgraduate degree at Cambridge in the UK paid for. So as you can see, success is not determined by the school that you attend.
Now, I want to say this because it almost seems like we went the other extreme saying, don't go to private schools. And that's not what we're saying, okay? We're saying consider the financial impact. Because again, I went to private school and was blessed with a lot of scholarships to do so. So I didn't come out with this huge student loan debt burden. But I have also advised people, and I wouldn't let my alumni association hear this, but I've, advised people that if they're choosing between one of my alma maters that's not giving them any money and another one that's going to give them a full ride, and they're very good schools, I might go with the one that gives them full ride. I have actually advised people to do that. So it's, again, going what Vivi said and considering the cost benefit of the price tag. Yes, there are some majors that are very specific. Accounting, not necessarily the case, right? So everything we say here, please understand you need to take it and then apply it to your situation. And we're going to say that here in a second when it comes to paying off student loans, because yes, there are some schools that are more specific for certain majors and all that type of stuff. But generally speaking, the pressure that we feel, okay, from family, friends, society, somebody mentioned social media in the remark section, our kids are feeling this. And then, yes, this is assuming you get into these schools. Someone mentioned that it's becoming even harder to get into your school of choice these days, even public colleges, because of the pandemic effect. So yes, that's a whole different conversation. How do you position your child or yourself to get into these schools? But assuming you do get into these schools, okay, how do you weigh the decisions, including the financial consideration?
Yeah, great point, Paul. And when we are weighing those decisions, there's also something to consider. What about a postgraduate degree? Because we see this quite often, that people want to go back to school to either get an MBA or they want to get a second degree. So, Paul, do you think there are different considerations in those cases? Should individuals get into debt to further their education goals at that point?
Yes, and we have prepared this presentation believing we're going to have different segments, in the spectrum of education, okay? And we saw that when we did the polls. Some people are thinking about it, some people are already there. And we even had a question, what about, funding my doctoral degree? Okay, so thank you for that question. Okay, so we have people that are about to start their first, jab at education. That might be like my son, okay, or someone of that generation. But there's people that have been working, they maybe either went to college and want to change the degrees or careers, okay? That happens quite a bit. I see it often. So want to give you, high level, stay away from student debt as much as possible, okay? Because debt is crippling. And we're going to show you an example of that in a second. But here's some strong considerations aside from the financial, but those are still going to be the core of this conversation. So if you're thinking about getting a post-secondary degree, a post-graduate degree, one, why are you making the change? Okay, I've had some people say, oh, I want to go back to school because I want to learn about architecture because it seems interesting. Well, that's great. You know, that could be a passion for you. But honestly, you can get a lot of free online courses from, I mean, I took a course at Yale the other day online for free, okay, through these other vendors and now online programs, and they're great courses, okay? So if it's just for an academic reason, you know, intelligence expansion, don't get into debt for that. You can do it very well, get a lot of great information in good programs without having to get the expense. Now, if it's because it's gonna help you, okay, get promoted or reach another venue or maybe shift what you're currently doing. Okay, here's what you have to say, what are the financial ramifications of that change? For example, here in Florida, there's a nursing qualifications. It may be federal, but I know we have a lot of clients who pursue nursing. So they start as a medical assistant or what have you, and then they have to achieve certain levels of certifications and degrees to reach that nurse status. So what happens? I say that's fine, but let's look at the cost of the institutions. The other day I was having this conversation and one private institution was charging a little bit over $100,000. The other one was charging $28,000. Well, what's the job opportunities? Oh, they're about the same. That one seemed like a no-brainer, okay? One has a more prestigious name, but we talked about that already. So you have to calculate the ramifications. What is gonna be the raise, you know, the financial increment, okay, when you get that new position, and then say, how long will it take me to pay that off? That increased student loan or student sacrifice price tag that's going to cost you to do that, okay? Going back to what Vivi said, let's think about this first. And then is getting a degree the only path to making the career change you want? There's getting a degree, there's getting a certification. I have a friend who's been promoted to different levels. She just retired this past year. She didn't get the advanced degree, but because of networking, okay, and doing such good jobs, and Karen's nodding her head, she knows what I'm talking about, okay? She was recruited heavily by different departments until she reached that rank and was getting degrees on the side, preparation certificates on the side, but basically the networking, that who you know thing worked very well for her. So different considerations, okay? And there's an article we put there, is graduate school worth the cost? It'll give you some other ideas of what to think about when you're thinking about getting that post-secondary education, and what the sacrifice may be from time, but from money as well. Okay, so we've addressed that. So people who are gonna get into debt, people who are considering it, what if I already have debt, Karen? Some of our population already has debt. Okay, so do you already have a student loan? What do I do? Yes, we're coming to you now and saying, let's talk about what are some options, what you're hearing out there. We wanna be very relevant to what's happening today. A word that's going out there that's been going around for a while now, okay, but especially last year leading up to the election, loan forgiveness, okay? So let's talk about loan forgiveness. I'm gonna sound cynical here for a second, okay? And Karen wanted me to do this because she didn't want to dare sound so negative. But,
it's true.
you know, I have this overarching feel that there's 3 ways to get your loan forgiven. Okay, and I say that because I do planning for people and I come across people who have student loan debt, and I understand what's going on now. You know, it's all deferred, okay, till, and we're going to talk about that in a second, till September. And then, you know, what would I do with that? Should I pay it off or should I wait till the first to get forgiven? I'm going to get there in a second. But the typical 3 ways that your loan's forgiven, if you see the left-hand picture, it's a funeral, is you die. Okay, but they're not going to expect you to pay it back anymore. Okay. This is a tough one because you could, in some circumstances, get it discharged in bankruptcy. Most people will tell you it's not possible because that's how hard it is to get it done. But there have been cases when it has been discharged, very hard to do, very expensive to do, okay? But it's there, okay? Or an act of Congress, okay, literally. So what am I saying? It is very difficult to get loans forgiven, okay? Why? Because they represent such a huge part of the economy and the institutions that gave the loans to begin with. Okay, as Tony mentioned at the very beginning and Vivi reiterated, you know, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. It is the 2nd largest debt burden in our country. Okay, second to real estate, to mortgages and homes. Okay, and then there's cars right behind it, all that kind of stuff. So just think about this rationally. Okay, we have this huge projection of income coming in if everybody paid their loans back, right? But let's just wipe it out. That's a serious consideration from an economic perspective, which I'm not getting political here. I'm sticking to economics. It's a tough one to swallow, which is why you've seen when the administration came in, they're very high on forgiving, 50,000, then it went down to 10. Now they're not even talking about it as much anymore, but say maybe we'll forgive a certain segment that just came out recently that you can apply for, but that's only, a little over 1 million people when it affects 45 million people. Okay, so very difficult. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about two different terms, which is deferrals. Okay, right now loans are deferred, right? So we don't have to make any payments back. And I appreciate there was a question here that says, okay, well, if I have it deferred, should I continue to make payments or should I wait? Okay, it's hard because the answer from a planning perspective, I'm giving you the webinar on steroids because I happen to be a financial advisor. It depends, okay, on what your current debt structure looks like. Okay, but typically speaking, deferring doesn't mean it's going away, as you know. And this is what people don't understand. Oh, it's deferred. I could take it. Well, you're just kicking the can down the road. Okay. But you're going to see what that means. And Vivi said it takes 12 to 20 years. So now it may take you 13 to 21, okay, to pay it off. That's not a good thing. Okay. So high level answer, yes, continue to make those payments, whether it's to loans or other debt structure. And I'm going to refer you to the CHALA, which we talked about debt management last year. Okay, so that's a good one to look into. But deferrals, again, does not mean it's going away. It means you're kicking the can down the road and you're depending on other people to allow you to defer it and see how long, etc. Okay, so you're still giving control to someone else and not getting rid of the issue. Again, loan forgiveness program. So there was this big hype about the nonprofit loan forgiveness program. And what was that? And many of you have heard this, okay? If you had student loan debt but went to work for certain qualifying nonprofit institutions and did that for 10 years, that was the typical program, you could get your loan forgiven. Okay, well, that program came out a little over a decade ago and people were starting to apply now because it's been 10 years and great. Statistically speaking, recent stats show that less than 1% of people who applied for forgiveness actually were forgiven. Okay, and that's disheartening, angering, disgraceful. It's really tough pill to swallow because a lot of people are being disqualified off of little technicalities. Oh, you had a pause period, you missed this, or you had to resubmit your number, whatever the technicality was. So less than 1% were getting their loans actually forgiven, okay? You can say, I'm going to be that 1%. And I have people say that, and that's, God bless you if you are. But the odds are stacked against you. That's all I'm saying, okay? And you're depending on the whim of another institution, another entity to say, you have our blessing, of which they're only doing that to less than 1%. Now, that being said, there are some programs that do have higher loan forgiveness success rates. There's some teacher programs, some nursing programs that if you go work as a nurse in some lower income hospitals or some lower income neighborhoods for schools, I actually have people that have had their loans forgiven because of that. They have higher ratios. This is why I said earlier today, make sure whatever field is in, you take what we present to you today and research, apply it to your specific industry and your specific field, okay? So these are the big terms that are going out there. We want to say, be careful because deferral doesn't mean it's going away. You're just doing this for now, okay? And forgiveness, that's a tough one. And both of these, you're depending on the whim of another institution, another person to say, yes, it's done, okay? As a financial advisor, okay, we don't like giving your financial future and putting it in the hands of someone else, okay? We're all, this is philosophical, okay? But we are very much in line with you take control. This is what these charters are about, empowering you to take control and not let someone else control your financial future. So Karen, being that now I've just said what our philosophy is, tell us what we believe is the real option as far as student loan debt.
Yes, the real option, and there's a reason why these financial empowerment charters are called empowerment charters, because we want to empower you. And what we want to tell you is the real option, so you have control, is to pay them off. You can go, I know that we've been putting that in the chat, you can go back or go on the website foryourfinancialwellness.com. And you can check out the debt elimination plan charla, where we lay out step by step the plan that you can create so that you can eliminate your student loan debt.
And I want to
Now-
say this, Karen,
Yes.
because someone asked, I want to pay off my student loan, but I also want to buy a house. What should I do first? So if you go to that charla, that's going to be very helpful. And at the end, we're going to share another resource of, that we're offering from our company as a free resource. So these are great questions. Please keep them coming. But we want to, again, direct you towards those charlas that we did last year, because they help you very much on the holistic perspective of not just student loan debt, but debt in general.
That's right. And I want to show you all an example of how you can make this happen. So if you go to the next slide, Vivi mentioned that the average student loan debt is $36,000. So if you send $1,000 in monthly payment, you can pay off these $36,000 in 3 years. So if you start at the age of 25, by the time you're 28, you have no student loans. Now let's look at two scenarios. On scenario one, let's say you say, I'm just going to continue making the minimum payment of $250 a month. And if you do that, you're going to be in line with the statistics that it's going to take you 20 years to pay off your $36,000. So if you're 25 years old, you're going to be 45 years old. And what's worse is that you would have paid $25,000 in interest alone. So
go ahead.
You would have paid a total of $61,000 between interest and your loan. And not just that, but for 20 years, you had that shackle around your ankle of the student debt.
That's right. The interesting thing is, you said, oh my goodness, 45 years old and you just finished paying. This is real. I have some of my colleagues who went to school with me who said, man, I wrote that last check and they're in their 40s. Okay. And they just wrote their last student loan. So we're not making this stuff up. This is real. This really happens. And then what happens is that's affecting the other areas of your finances, because the whole goal of this is to empower our people to build wealth, not to be contributing to the wealth of a financial institution. Nothing against financial institutions, but it's how do we build our wealth? Okay. So the 80% of persons who are postgraduate but haven't purchased a home yet, okay, so they're in that student loan repayment period, 80% of those people, when surveyed, say the main reason why they haven't bought a home is because they feel they can't afford it because they have all this money going out in different directions. Understand, the average student loan payment in this country is just under $400 a month, okay, if you were actually trying to repay this thing, not just pay the interest. And when you compare that to the average monthly household income per individual, that's almost 10% of your money. Okay, so you're almost paying an extra tax on your income, aside from your regular taxes, okay, and your living expenses, just to pay off student loan debt. Imagine if we could get rid of that, Karen. Show us what that could look like.
Yeah, so let's talk about same scenario, but scenario two, you pay them off, you pay the student loans in 3 years because you're sending $1,000 a month. You would have paid an interest $3,500 compared to the $25,000. So the total paid between your loan and the interest would have been just about under $40,000. Now, if you do that and you repurpose those $1,000 for the remainder 17 years, because again, just reminding you again, average payoff time for student loans is 20 years, 12 to 20 years, but we're saying 20. And you save those $1,000 and they get invested at 8.5% interest, that's going to yield you almost $500,000.
So you're telling me, Karen, that in our hypothetical situation, scenario one, we've got a 45-year-old who just finished paying their loans, right? Mm-hmm. Versus a 45-year-old that was a little bit more aggressive. And again, we could say 1,000, we could say 500, all the numbers are proportional. But if we did that, we could have a 45-year-old with almost $500,000 in the bank and no student loan debt. That's a huge difference. That's a huge difference. And
that's the power that you have. And some of you may say, $1,000, I can't do that. Well, I want to tell you that just like Vivi, she explained to you how she also was intense and intentional about paying off her debt. I graduated with no debt, but my husband had $60,000 of debt and $25,000 of that included student loans. And in 18 months, we paid it all off. And
Hmm.
we're not special. We promise you we're not.
Yes, you
We-
are. But
Oh, thank you, Paul. But really, you can do. You have the power to decide what to do. Don't let money control you. You get to control your money and your finance. So your ultimate goal is, at the end of this presentation, here's what we want to leave you with before we go into Q&A. Number one, if you don't have student loans, don't get into student loans. I mean, there's a reason why we're having conversations around student loans, because it is a big deal. Once, it's so easy to sign a promissory note. It is so easy, but you don't know what you're doing the moment you sign those for your financial future.
well, now
And
you
if
do.
well, now you do. So you're responsible for what you know right now. And if you do have them, decide today to start paying them off. Take control of your finances. Convert that payment that you send to your student loans into investments, into potential generational wealth.
Very good. Well, Karen, I want to thank you for sharing that. We want to open this up for Q&A. I know there's questions that have been coming through. So hopefully that's helpful. We talked to different segments of people on the spectrum of, their educational attainment. Okay. But the goal was to be able to equip you with enough tools, curiosity, intrigue, upsetness, discomfort, not to make anyone feel bad, but to say, you know what, we have to, well, somebody told me years ago, you have to be tired of being tired. Okay, and the goal of this, again, which I'm so grateful to Tony, Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and Nationwide, is to really empower you, to really make a difference in your financial future. So I want to welcome Vivi back, invite Vivi to come back and join us as we go through some questions here. I know it's almost 5 o'clock, so we're going to try to get to some of these. I know we answered some of these already. So there was a question that came in here, and I just saw a second ago. It says, can we talk about loan consolidation? I'm planning on doing this in the future, but have no idea where to start. Okay. You guys want to tackle that? I can tackle it, however you prefer.
You can tackle it. You can tackle it.
She says that because
I know what you're gonna say.
So loan consolidation is a strategy, okay, but it's not a solution. Okay, and that's what I want to make the distinction. It's kind of like the deferment. It's deferring kicks the can on the road, but doesn't resolve the issue. So yes, it can be good. In terms of it's easy, peace of mind, everything is one place. My fear is whenever people do loan consolidation, and I'm not saying this, Isabel, that you're going to do this, but it's people will consolidate, maybe they streamline their payment. The goal here is not to lower your payment. Karen gave an example of actually increasing your payment to get rid of this thing. Okay, so if your idea for loan consolidation is, oh, I can lower my payment, that's not enough reason to do it, because then what people find is, oh, I got extra cash flow, let me get into debt somewhere else. Okay, digging a deeper hole. Okay. If you can do it to lower interest rate, streamline your debt, and then now you're going to attack one debt because it makes you feel good, great. Behaviorally, that's a good thing to do. So again, weighing the pro and con. It's not a solution, but it is a strategy depending on your purpose for it. Okay. What if someone chose to invest while making minimum payments to their student loans? Is there still a large difference in overall wealth in 20 years? Karen, I'll let you address that one.
Listen, I mean, we can slice and dice this as many ways that we can, right? But at the end of the day, you want to get rid of the shackles. Like, I really feel, I know what that's like. Vivi knows what that's like. When you have debt, that's a shackle around your ankle. The moment that you decide, I am going to focus on paying this off so that I can then take all of my extra cash flow and invest it or spend it in the way that it aligns with my values, that's what you want to do. Why would you want to, carry that ball, that chain around when you can really have a plan? It is possible. So I would say, the short answer is you can pay it off. You can pay it off.
That's exactly right. So there was a question here that says, if I'm looking to get my master's degree and I have the money, should you use your 529 plan? I'm not sure if they already have the money in the 529 plan or they have the money separately. So, I mean, if you have the money in the 529 structure, right, you can use it, okay? And yes, why not use it? It's for that purpose, for educational purpose. So I don't know if you're trying to do it now and then there's no reason to put it in the 529 to then pay off if you're getting your master's degree now. Okay, if you have the money, you have the money. 529 is a great tool for deferring taxes and getting it tax-free later down the road. But if it's that close, there's no need. I think I'm interpreting that question that way. If not, I'm happy to see a follow-up question within that. Okay. And guys, as you're reading the questions, feel free to say, hey, I see one here that I want to answer. Okay. So
I was going to say there's one about 529s. Does it, are you still able to have a 529 and then will that hinder someone from applying to scholarships and grants, et cetera, financial aid? It doesn't hinder you from doing that. There are scholarships out there that are not based on financial need, but perhaps school merit. So still, I would consider it, please apply, please do the FAFSA, go through the whole process and do it. Just because you have savings plan doesn't mean that you can't apply for scholarships.
Okay, I do want to take a pause for a second because it's 5:02 right now. So I know we had, allotted an hour for this conversation. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Vivi, Karen, I'm okay going an extra 10 minutes if you're okay with that to try to wrap up some of these questions. If we don't get to your question, okay, one thing we've done in the past is the foundation does send us the questions afterwards, and we try to get back to all of you and answer all the questions in a timely basis. So as I promised, if we can't get to today right now, we will get to you on a timely basis. But are you guys okay staying an extra 5-10 minutes to try to wrap up a few more of these questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Vivi, you good with? Okay, great. Okay. So, and I want to add to what you just finished saying as far as the 529, does that hinder me from getting scholarships, grants, or financial aid? I want to make a clear distinction. Financial aid, in my definition, is not a student loan. Okay, in fact, that's financial hindrance as far as that's not financial aid, because giving you a loan is not really helping you. It's really actually shackling you in the future. It's committing your future income, right? So when we talk about financial aid, we're talking about scholarships and grants, money you don't have to repay. Now, what happens, there are different ways, and you can read about this when a 529 is structured. If you're applying for financial aid, it could hinder you getting scholarships year 2 because it counts against a formula. There's a 4-tier formula: parents' income and assets versus kids' income and assets. I'm not going to get into that now. I'm happy to deal with that offline. If you want to send the Scholarship Foundation, the Heritage Scholarship Fund, rather, Heritage Foundation, sorry, Hispanic Heritage Foundation, or Nationwide, the question, I'm happy to deal with that on a personal basis. Okay, so any other questions that you're seeing that are standing out that you might want to answer personally?
Yeah, I think there was one about Osman was asking of scholarship opportunities. Fatima is also as a DACA. If you're DACA, if you're a dreamer, there are opportunities available, okay? There are Instagram accounts for DACA scholarship opportunities. It's really all about research. So again, as someone that used to do this as a side hustle, you've got to do the work and you have to look. Right now, there's so much information. We listed some scholarship websites where you can go in there and look and filter through immigration status, through local geography, demographics. So your job should be as, kind of part-time job. I tell people when I go to school, sometimes I get to speak in front of students. I tell them, rather than you scrolling through social media aimlessly, use that same time to look for scholarships, because again, I just shared with you the power that you have when you do that, and how much money you can get if you actually do that. So take this as a challenge and as an opportunity for you. Go out there, you have those resources to look for opportunities that apply to you as a DACA student, and even as a graduate student, you can find them.
Very good, very good. Another question that came here: are student loan payments tax deductible? Okay, I'm gonna take this one on because while Karen is a CPA, we always say consult an accountant who prepares taxes. Why? There are certain circumstances where you can deduct the interest, okay, on student loans, but those are very specific. So it is viable, not the whole payment, okay, but sometimes the interest can be deductible if you fit certain criteria, certain circumstances. So without knowing your situation, I would say go consult a tax preparer, an accountant, or enrolled agent to be able to see if in your situation you might be able to deduct any of your payments. Okay. I was approached to consolidate my student loans, $50,000, by a banking institution with lower payments, but a longer term and eventually more of a balance. Are they predatory? I don't know. I don't want to accuse anyone of being predatory. Are banks looking to make money on more interest? Absolutely. Okay, so most loan consolidation programs are looking to make money in the longer term. So when your mortgage is extended, when your student loans extended, that means more interest for them. Okay, and if it means more interest for them, that means less money for you. Okay, there's more coming in your pocket. So, you know, Vivi, I know you went into something. Somebody was asking about what can give me an 8.75 yield. I don't know exactly what that means, but you've said this when we had our conversation. You know, that's a big yield. You know, in terms of return, sounds almost too good to be true. We talked about these things. You know, what do you do when something approaches you and it's? I went from the predatory to the, oh, this sounds great. What would you advise to people who have advice to say, oh, do this because it sounds really great?
Well, I would refer them to someone like you guys. You can actually start investing your money. I think sometimes we think that only rich people can have financial advisors, but that's just not true. We can all have access to financial advisors that can help us invest our money. They can invest it in mutual funds. And if you're up for the challenge and you feel like you have the time and the resources to learn how to invest money yourself, you can start and open your own brokerage. There's also robo-advisors, and start investing your money, maybe in index funds. There's multiple ways that you can find that kind of interest and start growing your money for sure.
Right.
And we have a charla on that. Last year we talked about investing. So you can go back to your foryourfinancialwellness.com and go sort through the other charlas. There's one where we specifically talked about investing.
That's a good one. And, you know, someone asked again earlier, should I pay off my student loans a little bit, but invest the rest? Refer them to the charla, because student loans, anything where you're paying interest away, we call bad money at the company. Okay, anything that's taking money away from you, interest payments, okay, is not good. You know, so you want to get rid of all the bad before you start building on that, okay? Because your student loan payments are guaranteed to be working against you.
Mm-hmm.
Investments are not guaranteed in any given year, okay? People have this myopic perspective. Oh, look how great the market's doing the last couple of years. And I'm all about that. I'm an investment guy, right? But there's been times when I've told people in the last couple of years, don't invest. Like, what do you mean? You're an investment guy. Yeah, but you have all this money working against you. That's going to be hard to compete. If the market pulls back, etc., you're going to be double whammied again. So we're going to refer you to the debt management charla last year. Try to get rid of all the bad money first before we start investing and building for the future. And I do want to end with, it's almost 5:10. Okay, but does paying off student loans during deferment affect your credit score? Oh, okay. So someone else also asked about this, about credit score. Okay, and paying off your debt quickly, even if there's no prepayments. Any of you want to address that one? Okay,
I'll address it.
I'll address it. Okay, and we'll wrap up with this today. But no, it does not affect your credit score in terms of there's I'm not going to get into credit, but there's several components that make up your credit score. One is history of payments, but one is also your debt to income ratio. If you have too much debt relative to your income, that affects your score negatively. So in one regard, it may shorten your history of repayments, but on the other regard, it's going to better your debt to income ratio. So it's a science and an art to manage the debt elimination. Be careful what you hear out there. Someone asked me my credit score, and I have someone that I know that actually sells cars for a living at a car dealer. Nothing wrong with that, but he questioned me because he says, well, if you're going to go finance a car, which I don't do, okay, I'm going to refer you to again the charla from last year as far as financing bad debt, but he said, well, since I don't have that, my credit score must be, I have a very good credit score. It's over 800. I don't say that to brag, but how do you do that without having all these outstanding loans and payments? There's a way to do that, understanding that the institutions that want to take interest from you are not going to tell you how to do it without paying them interest, okay? So different conversation. No, you should not be worried about your credit score being affected. Your number one goal is to increase your cash flow and eliminate the bad debt so you can then start increasing your wealth. So guys, I know that we've gone over time, but thank you for staying this long. I want to refer you again. Thank Karen, thank Vivi for being here, sharing your personal, being transparent with your personal stories as well as your technical knowledge. I want to encourage you and everyone, the listeners, to go to foryourfinancialwellness.com. It is loaded with a bunch of information and resources. You should be getting a follow-up email as well. My company, Allgen, has also offered to give away, we have these webinars, these little video tutorials on different stuff. So there'll be a link that they're gonna follow up that you can sign up for free and just get different videos that my partner and I do, talking about how much debt, etc., getting rid of investments, things of that nature, okay? So again, thank you so much for listening. Nationwide, thank you. Hispanic Heritage Foundation, thank you. And we invite you to our next Chala. We hope to see you there. Have a great day, everyone.